Okay, we're gonna talk connectors and fittings. Let's start with the quick disconnects that you would find like on your air compressor, and if you have a tire inflator or other pneumatic tools. There are more than one. There's more than one style of this connector. They look very similar if you just like grab them out of a pile at an automotive or a home improvement store, but they're different. The two that I've ran across, and I've standardized on this particular style. This one has like a 45 degree like V bevel. There's another style that looks almost identical to this, except instead of having that those two 45 degree bevels with the flat bottom, it is just like a half circle groove. They are not compatible. You try to put them together and it kind of pushes in part way and never connects. So don't if you're trying to order stuff or acquire parts, keep that in mind. There are different styles. I'm sure these have a designation that I don't know offhand, but the most important thing is just to know there is at least a couple of styles of this. The other thing let's talk about is these are this is a coupler. It's 1/4 inch. This is 1/4 inch polyethylene water line for this. I had this laying around from a ice maker install on a refrigerator. These are really handy. If you just push them together, they lock. You can't pull it back out. If you depress this ring, it comes right back out. So simply by depressing that ring, it releases it. These also come in metric sizes. 6mm and 1/4 inch are almost the same size and are generally interchangeable. I've not really had any problem with that. I have used 6mm line with a 1/4 inch connector, and I think 6mm is, I don't know, 1 or 2/10 of a millimeter larger than 1/4 inch. So it is a little tighter fit, and you may have to work a little more to get it to release if you try to remove it, but it does work. And I've not had any problems sealing either direction. I also have 6mm couplers that I've used 1/4 inch line with, and at reasonable pressures I've never had any problem. All right, let's talk pipe thread. I mentioned this in the previous video, but this pipe thread is 1/4 inch in TP. It measures, just for confusion, it measures about a 1/2 inch. If you have an 1/8 inch pipe thread, it's going to measure about 3/8 of an inch. So if you've got these parts laying around and wondering what size they are, it is a little confusing. The other thing, the tolerances on these threads are always all over the place. This white residue you see is actually Teflon tape that was left over from a previous use. So when this came out of the package, it was just chrome. There was no the white residue you see didn't exist. Unlike this one, which comes pre thread what is it's got a sealant on it from the factory. That dull gray stuff you see in the threads is like a pre-installed sealant. When we put this one into the valve, you'll see that it's quite loose. So the how much sealant you're going to require to get that to seal is going to be a lot more than this one, which just after a couple threads starts to firm up. This is usable as is. You can just because I mean you can feel that it snugs up. You can just screw that in and it's going to seal. And with these, you only have to snug them up. You'll feel the sealant deforming into the threads, and you don't have to really torque these down. Just right, really good and firm is all it takes. But this one, because it's so loose, I can actually, with my fingers, bottom it out without ever really having any resistance. So let's talk Teflon tape. Mine's messed up. Here we go. This is used, this is one of the things you can use to seal these fittings. It's important when you're wrapping this around the threads that you wrap it in a direction to where when you install the fitting, it actually continues to wrap the tape around the threads versus unwrap it. So in this case, we would wrap in, tripod is in the way, we'd wrap in this direction, so that when it's threaded in, it continues to wrap. As loose as this is, I would probably just start by testing probably 4 to 5 wraps. This is a quite thin material. The other thing I always do when I'm wrapping this is I try not to overlap the tape at the bottom too much, to where it's gonna overlay into the fitting, or into the air path, because as you screw this in, the threads are going to cut this material, and you could end up with loose particles of this Teflon tape actually in your air line. And if you're going into air tools, or in our case valves, that could end up causing you problems. So I always try to get as close to the bottom as I can without having it overlap into the air path. And then you just stretch it around there, and you'll see that, get that in the light correctly, you'll see that it mashes right down into the threads and helps seal it up. So like I said, because it's as loose as this one is, I would start with probably 4 or 5 wraps. And if it doesn't feel like it's, when you go to screw it in there, if it doesn't feel like it's sealing up good, you can just add another wrap or 2. When you get it wrapped as much as you want, it just tears. And the finished product looks like that. And you can kind of roll the tape back a little bit off the end, where it doesn't get into the air path if you do overlap a bit. That's it. Thanks.